Welcome again, ladies and gentlemen, to Joe Stunner Boxing. Now, there have been a lot of, there's been a lot of doom-laden rhetoric about Mike Tyson fighting Jake Paul. Who'd have ever believed it? Not for Jake Paul, but for Mike Tyson because of his age. And I made a video talking about the fight. It wasn't a prediction video. I just felt the need to mention a few things that, for some inexplicable reason, a lot of people are overlooking. And the most obvious one is that Mike Tyson is 31 years older than Jake Paul. Now, I've worked with nurses and doctors because of the job I do. I used to work in the drug and alcohol field, and now I work with vulnerable adults. But I am always led by their expertise. I am not a medical expert at all. Okay, so I may know a few things in layman's terms, but I can't sit here and tell you about neurology or anything like that, or even the effects of physiology. But one person who can is Dr. Neil Scott, who is the Chief Medical Officer of the British Boxing Board of Control. And in today's Boxing News, Dr. Scott is interviewed, and he's asked specifically about the situation with Tyson. And I'm going to read you some excerpts. Now, first of all, it's important to differentiate between serious head trauma, which would be a bleed on the brain, which requires immediate attention, an operation, or maybe inducing you into a coma and giving you, releasing the pressure on the brain and so on and so forth. Like I say, it could be if it's a hematoma that's bleeding too much, you have to have a brain operation. And we know all about Michael Watson, and Spencer Oliver suffered this. Rod Douglas, when he fought Harold Graham, suffered it. People like Spencer Oliver and Rod Douglas, they were got to quickly, so they were able to make more or less full recoveries. Michael Watson, of course, had life-changing injuries, and God bless him, he's a huge inspiration, but he does need 24/7 care. Okay, so that can vary, but that's traumatic brain injury is very different from chronic traumatic encephalopathy, CTE, as it's called. And Dr. Scott talks about this. He mentions this and he says, you've got to be very careful. CTE is a degenerative thing. So a fighter might retire at the age of 35 and the blows to the head and so on and so forth may sort of manifest themselves in dementia later on. The speech might go, your cognitive abilities go. Punch drunkenness is what they call it. Pugilistica dementia, if you want to be fancy. All this sort of stuff comes under the umbrella of CTE. All right. So let me read you what this gentleman had to say specifically about Mike Tyson. All right, because I think it's very, very interesting, and he obviously knows a damn sight more about this stuff than I do, and probably you do as well. So I'm gonna read you this. Okay, He's asked, Mike Tyson returns to the ring at the weekend, 58 years old, to take on 27-year-old Jake Paul. It's raised a lot of eyebrows. What are your thoughts from a medical perspective? And Dr. Scott says the following. My medical thoughts are broken down into two areas. Mike Tyson, we all know his first career as an elite athlete, world-class, trained, conditioned. So no doubt he has that elite baseline level of skill and ability within the ring. He will have trained for this, undoubtedly. He will be conditioned, but that's probably where it stops, to be honest, because there are so many other issues that do concern me from a medical standpoint. His age is the first point. He's nearly getting into his 60s. Once you get into your 40s, we know that you get a degree, not uniformly throughout the brain, but you do get it to a degree of cerebral atrophy or shrinkage. So the brain shrinks when you get into your 40s, okay? Essentially, there is more space within your head, within your skull, for your brain to move. It means it's more susceptible, whether that be to the linear, straight, back and forward trauma or the rotational shearing forces. It's those kinds of forces with having more space in the skull for the brain to move around that are the concern. So if you imagine a coin rattling in a box, the more you rattle it, the more it hits the side. If this coin is made of, robust but nevertheless, invaluable tissue, it's going to get the risk of a brain bleed is heavier, but if it rattles too much inside the box and hits the sides, and you know what I mean. Imagine that analogy. Dr. Scott carries on. He says his blood vessels are different now. Tyson's he's talking about here. They haven't got the elasticity and the robustness that they probably had when he was in his 20s and 30s. They probably have to travel a little bit more distance because of the shrinkage in the brain. And when I say distance, I mean between the brain and the layers around the brain. Then you have the general effects of his lifestyle. We know he went through a period where he wasn't as active, as fit. He was smoking. So the vessels might be damaged by cholesterol. They might not be as flexible. And that may result in damage to the vessel and bleeding. His age is a factor. Physiologically, he's just not going to be what he was when he was in his 20s or 30s. Yes, he still is probably in very good condition, but his cardiovascular system, his respiratory system, won't respond in the same way as it used to. 2-minute rounds. As we know, the fight is going to be 8 2-minute rounds. Okay, says Dr. Scott, that's some improvement. Yes, it's 8 rounds, so at least it's not 12. But at the end of the day, he's fighting a 27-year-old gentleman who, albeit has had a short boxing career, but it would appear has really given himself to this. You see the training videos. There's no doubt that Jake Paul is a conditioned individual who is obviously very strong and can throw a very, very good punch. At the end of the day, the risk factors for Mike Tyson are much higher than they are for Jake Paul. People do say they worry about Jake Paul in this contest. Well, I've got to admit, from a medical perspective, I disagree. I worry for Mike Tyson in this contest. Okay, so perfectly put by Dr. Scott. And I mean, what can you add to that? I mean, this guy Neil Scott is his day job. He's actually an NHS maxillofacial and head and neck surgeon. So his daily work revolves around facial trauma, soft tissue, hard tissue reconstruction in the face and the neck, and also includes patients with mouth cancer, skin cancer, and other significant diseases. So everything from the neck up, in other words. Yeah. Look, 8-2s, what's that? 16 minutes of fighting. Now, a lot of people have said in the previous comment section of the previous video I made, look, the fix is in. Do you know what I mean? And it may be in to protect Tyson from getting a good hiding, because there's no doubt. I said this in the previous video. Look, I'm not medically trained, but I know from experience, because I'm only a year younger than Mike Tyson. I know what aging is like, because I've lived it. I'm living it. I'm feeling it, just as probably some of you are who are similar age. You know, you do slow up. You do feel your joints stiffening. Your legs get heavier. You know, your ligaments are probably not as flexible as they were. You know, that's aging. That's just aging. And certainly from, you know, when I talk about neurological brain shrinkage, I'm convinced I've got it, because very often I'm thinking of, it's not even just in boxing. I'm thinking of like fighters from who I watch and I can't remember his name. Well, you know, I have no idea why. The most obvious things slip my mind. Suddenly I can't, names in particular, you know, and to some extent dates. And I can still retain quite a lot, you know, but when I was 20, 25 years younger, my God, I knew I was, sounds like I'm blowing my own trumpet, but I was pretty much a walking encyclopedia. Now, it doesn't matter that I'm forgetting facts, because facts, they can be on the internet, they can be in books, they can, you know, information is there to access. But the point I'm making is that the brain does slow down. And that's a sign of the shrinkage. And I think this is a very, very interesting thing. Now, look, the Tyson-Jake Paul thing is on Netflix. It's free. 262 million homes have Netflix in the world. My God. A lot of them, I suppose, will watch it out of sheer curiosity. I'm far more looking forward to the Taylor Serrano rematch on the undercard, but that's another story. I did a video for that. But it's a cash grab. It's a cash grab. And I just hope it goes well and there's nothing bad happens. You know what I mean? And although I think Jake Paul does take the game seriously and deserves some credit for that, he's trying to be a fighter. He's what you might call an area level fighter. If you're in the UK, he'd probably fight for an area title. Don't forget, he lost to Tommy Fury, who's little more than a celebrity semi-boxer, semi-professional boxer, I suppose. Although he did have Fury on the floor, but he's 27. Mike Tyson, one of the greatest heavyweights who ever lived, is 58. So you can't get away from that fact, whichever way you slice and dice it. But let me know what you think. Leave your comments below as usual. And if you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button because you help us out a great deal there. And if you could subscribe to the channel, we've got lots more videos for you. I'd appreciate that too. Much love to all of you. I always appreciate your time. I'll get you later. Bye for now.